It's the final round of the F1 25 season, round 24 at Abu Dhabi, and we still have a championship battle on our hands between three drivers. The first time since 2010 that more than two drivers have gone into the final round of the F1 Championship with an opportunity to win the Drivers' World Championship and take home that illustrious trophy that Max Verstappen has won on the previous four occasions. Can he make it 5 in a row? Can Oscar Piastri provide a miracle here and win his first World Championship? Or can Lando Norris finally get this across the line, unlike what he was able to do in Qatar after the strategy blunder of McLaren has allowed this to be a three-way fight in the closing stages of this season? Because how is Max in this position? How does Max have 7 race wins, the exact same amount as both McLaren drivers? Well, that's what you get when you have two drivers going for the same title and you have a team who doesn't really know how to win a Drivers' World Championship. So let's have a look at what we need to keep an eye on for this weekend. Have a look at the schedule, the track as well. Going to play an important role here this weekend. Who does it favour? The tyre allocations, what strategies can we predict here this weekend? And of course, touch on our predictions. Who do I think is going to win the World Championship? Who do I think will win this race? And what are the permutations? Who needs to finish where? And what scenario needs to occur for them to become the 2025 F1 World Champion? So the schedule for this weekend is back to your standard race weekend schedule. 3 practice sessions with qualifying on the Saturday and the race on Sunday. Now, something to be aware of this weekend, guys, is that practice 1, we will see a lot of rookies. It is the final opportunity for teams who have not done the mandatory 2 allocated sessions for rookies. Each side of the garage has to give up 2 sessions throughout the season for rookies to participate in a practice session. And Abu Dhabi is always one in FP1 where we do see that be used. It has been kind of the case, almost tradition now really, that the FP1 session in Abu Dhabi is gifted to the rookies for one of those sessions. And well, there is one driver out of the 3 who are fighting for the World Championship here this weekend who will not be participating in FP1 because they have to relinquish their car for one of those rookies. And that is Oscar Piastri. Yes, Oscar Piastri, who is now 3rd place in the championship and is 16 points behind Lando Norris. He is going to only have 2 practice sessions here this weekend to be able to set the car up and get into a rhythm. So how will that play into his preparations for this weekend? We will see. Undoubtedly, it's not what he would want, but that is, everyone has had to give up at least 2 sessions throughout this season. It just so happens that this championship is still up for grabs. So yes, we'll see how important that is to Oscar's preparation when he finally jumps in the car Friday afternoon in FP2. Now on to the setting of this championship finale, which Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen and Lando Norris will be contending with this weekend, and that is the Yas Marina circuit. We have been coming to this track for nearly 20 years. The first time we came here was in 2009, and well, I think apart from 1 or 2 years, it has occupied the final spot on the calendar since then. And it pains me to say that, to be honest with you, because Interlagos deserves that final spot. If you was not around watching F1 when Interlagos was the final race of the year, God, you missed out on some absolute crackers. And unfortunately, I can't say the same about this circuit. And you may be looking at it and thinking, why? It's got 2 long straights, 2 DRS zones. Why would this track not provide good racing? And it's a question really that I ask myself every single year. Now, there have been changes to try and improve the wheel-to-wheel racing here and the overtaking opportunities. Turn 5 used to be a chicane there before you got to that hairpin. The hairpin has always been there, but where the DRS detection zone is, there used to be a chicane there. So it would really kind of slow down the action and ruin the flow, whereas now Turn 5 is an overtaking opportunity, or at least it's an opportunity for drivers to take different lines and force the driver ahead to think about their rear view mirrors, and it can leave them vulnerable, of course, down that back straight into the primary overtaking spot into Turn 6 with that DRS. And then Turn 9 was the other addition where there was also a chicane there, and now that is just one long hairpin. And I will admit, but that has definitely improved the racing. I don't think it's necessarily had the high desired effect that they were hoping for. I think they was hoping that there'd be more wheel-to-wheel racing through there, but as we know, modern Formula One has a dirty air issue, and I think that's really why this track has always provided not good season finales, to be honest with you, because it is a track that kind of, I think, has a bit of everything. I feel like if this track was just a committed low downforce circuit, then we would probably see more good overtaking, because drivers would struggle a bit more with their tyres, there'd be a bit more sliding, and there'd be a bit more degradation, and we would see more tyre offsets, which we know is essential to overtaking in F1 now these days. And it's also not a high downforce circuit, so that long back straight, the slipstream would be more effective than it is today. And you look at it, it has a bit of everything, so really it's kind of a medium downforce setup. And what this track does is that it kind of sets the teams out in a pecking order that is as they have been in the constructors. So we see the fastest car of all year perform always really well here. Second fastest is normally always second fastest, and so on and so on as you go down. The slowest of the year is always slowest here, and that's just kind of how it's always played out, unless there's been some shenanigans that have happened here back in 2016, of course, with Lewis Hamilton slowing up Nico Rosberg to try and allow him to be overtaken. Of course, Sergio Perez held up Lewis Hamilton when it came to the 2021, and of course that race control decision. But we haven't, in my personal experience of watching races here, had any memorable races, to be honest with you. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe you have fonder memories than me. And even 2010, when the last time we had 3 drivers having a mathematical opportunity to win the Drivers' Championship, even then it wasn't particularly that great, and we found that Fernando Alonso found himself stuck behind a much slower Renault of Vitaly Petrov and Robert Kubica, and he couldn't overtake them in that Ferrari and get the top 5 that was required to win the Drivers' World Championship. So yeah, drivers kind of become a bit stuck here because of the dirty air. The first sector in particular is quite hard on the tyres, particularly those fronts. Turn 1, we see so often drivers run wide there and ruin their lap before they even begin in qualifying. So that's something they need to be careful of. And over the crest through turn 2 and 3, where it's flat out, drivers need to be careful of that washout to the white line and exceeding track limits. And if the wind picks up through that first sector, it can be quite treacherous, and we have seen big moments through there, big spins, and of course collisions as well at the start of the race through that first sector. And then of course you get to the second sector, where it's all about the top speed and your braking ability and your rear traction, because you've got the slow corner of turn 5 and of course the chicane in turn 6 and 7, where it is possible to overtake down there, and of course down into turn 9 as well, where you're then going back to, of course, the dirty air element of, have you got enough front grip through turn 9 to be able to hang it around the outside or hold it on the inside, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve there. And then sector 3, I think, is just a nothing sector. I can't remember the last time there was an actual overtake through that last sector. Now technically turn 9 is sector 3 now, so yes, there have been overtakes in Sector 3 if you want to be literal there. But you get what I'm saying is that after turn 9, the majority of Sector 3 is kind of useless. It's just there for scenery. It's around the hotel. You go under the hotel through turn 13 and 14, around the bay through turn 10, 11, 12, etc. And then turn 15 and 16 brings you back to, of course, the pit lane, the start-finish straight. And I don't think I've ever seen an overtake in the last couple of corners either, unless someone has spun it or gone particularly wide. Of course, there's corners here like turn 15 and turn 16 that the drivers need to be careful of with track limits for their qualifying laps. And turn 14, I mean, we have seen many a knock of the wall there, many an incident into the exit of turn 14. Very easy to get your foot on the loud pedal too early, and the rear just steps out and they like tank slap straight into the wall. I imagine Ferrari will probably touch that wall a few times this week with how snappy that rear end looked on Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton in Qatar. So that's maybe one to put in the predictions. But overall, we will see more overtaking here than Qatar. That is an absolute given. I don't think it was possible to see less overtaking at Qatar. The only way you see less overtaking at Qatar is by going to Monaco. That's how low the amount of overtakes there were. And even when there was an attempt at an overtake, there was a collision, wasn't there, which brought out that timely safety car with Hülkenberg and Gasly. So I personally, while of course we have the championship to keep us intrigued here, and thank God we have the championship to keep us intrigued here, I once again have low expectations for this race weekend, for the actual spectacle of the race itself. I hope I am proven wrong, because what a race it would be if we had the top three going at it. And of course there is always the potential with safety cars and so forth to bunch the field back up, which would always make it exciting, but yeah, we normally see quite a large field spread here. We see the front runners build quite a pit stop gap quite early, and that kind of removes any of the intrigue here, but thankfully we do have that championship battle to keep our keen eye on throughout this 58 lap race come Sunday. So on to the tyres for this weekend, and we are on the C3, C4 and C5 on the softer range and the exact same compounds that we used last year in 2024. And well, your first question may be, what strategies were run last year in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix? Well, unfortunately, it was a one-stop strategy. And, well, if we get no safety cars here this weekend, that's exactly what we'll see probably again. Because how often have we seen this year tracks be a one-stop strategy? More often than not, too many, unfortunately, and hopefully that changes next year. Now, of course, a two-stop strategy isn't the solution to all of our problems to an exciting race, because we just saw a two-stop strategy, a mandated two-stop strategy at Qatar. And look how that race played out. So it is dependent on the track, of course. But the tyres here, you can see on the Pirelli graphic, pretty much every single tyre takes a bit of a battering here. The rears in particular, that front right takes a battering. We've already discussed the nature of this track layout and how it has a mixture of all different corners, which requires rear traction and, of course, the necessity of that front grip specifically through those first few corners. So it is a track that really does use all of the car, all of the balance of the car and the performance of the car, and it's right down the middle when it comes to that scale as well, with the track information where traction, tyre stress, asphalt grip, braking, asphalt abrasion, lateral load, track evolution, downfalls. It's pretty much down the middle for all of them. So this track, that's why this track really does provide is a good barometer, really, of the overall season, and why the fastest car throughout the season, the Constructors' Champions, win here the majority of times, and why, of course, the worst, there's no real kind of surprises when it comes to midfield teams, and we see those front runners, as they have been throughout this season, do exactly the same here. And that's probably what we'll see in relation to McLaren and Max, which I think would be exciting for everyone, but maybe for, of course, Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri, not what they actually want, because we'll have a look at those permutations. So when it comes to tyres, not really too much else to discuss here. The only way we're going to get a two-stop is if there's a safety car. Otherwise, I think it's going to be your bog standard one-stop that we've seen so often this year and at this circuit. Now the weather for Abu Dhabi, and you'll be surprised to hear it's dry and hot. So, the final predictions of 2025. Who is going to win the final race in Abu Dhabi? Who is going to win the Drivers' World Championship? I think Lando's going to get it done. Yeah, maybe a bit anticlimactic, but I think he will. And the reason why I think he will, and there is logic behind this, of course, it isn't just Brit bias, which some may think, and maybe throwing accusations at me right now. I don't think Lando has actually dropped any form. I still think Lando is still in form. Now, the last two race weekends, he has been undoubtedly let down by the team. The disqualification in Vegas after finishing P2. Yes, some will say, well, he maybe only finished P2 because he was driving an illegal car. Regardless, you're talking millimeters, fractions of millimeters, and he still was comfortably P2. So even if the ride height was slightly higher, I still think he would have finished P2. And he finished P2 out on track. Got the DQ there. Qatar. While he wasn't as quick as his teammates, because Oscar had a return to form at a track that he has very good success at in his time in F1, he still was P2, comfortably P2, and would have finished 1-2 there and picked up another second place in a row after the back of dominant performances in Brazil and Mexico. And this championship arguably should only really be right now between Lando and Oscar, but McLaren have let not just Oscar down in the last race, but they've let Lando down over the last 2 races. And Lando's form hasn't dropped out on track. Lando did what he could in Qatar with where the team obviously positioned him out on track. Same thing with Oscar, not their fault. So heading into this last race, the form is still with Lando, in my opinion. A track that he won at last year, that he got pole position at last year, at a track where I also expect McLaren to be still quicker than the Red Bull here. Maybe not as quick as what they were and have as much an advantage as they had at Qatar, but I think it will be on the softer end of the range as well. I think the McLarens are going to be able to just go faster for so much longer here, keep those tyres in a much better temperature window than that of the Red Bull, because at Qatar it was on the harder end of the scale and the hard compound tyre fared much better, whereas this time around we're at the softer end, we're on the C3, C4, C5, and that's just going to play into the strengths of the McLaren. And I think if any 2 drivers are going to be fighting out for the race win, it will be the 2 McLarens. Now, never rule Max out, of course. We do that at your peril. This is round 24 now. He has the same amount of race wins as both the McLaren drivers, which is absolutely crazy to say out loud, considering the performance advantage that McLaren has had throughout this season. But that just shows the level of mistakes that Lando and Oscar have made this year, and of course McLaren as well. But Lando in himself hasn't made really any mistakes over the last 5-6 races that I can think of. He could make mistakes, of course, here in Abu Dhabi because of the pressure that is on him. This is where it matters. This is crunch time for them. So that undoubtedly could play a factor. And, well, Max Verstappen, this is not his first rodeo. He's done this 4 times already, and he's going for a 5th time in a row. But I think Lando is going to win here. And at worst, he's going to finish on the podium because I just don't see George Russell mixing it up there. I don't see Kimi Antonelli mixing it up there, even though he's on good form. Don't see the Mercedes having the performance of those front 3 in the championship, just like we saw in Qatar, where they were driving off into the distance until, of course, they had to make an eventual pit stop. But if you look after that safety car restart, you saw the performance advantage that those 3 have over the rest of the field, like the levels of them. George was nowhere. Kimi was nowhere be able to keep up with them. Carlos Sainz wasn't. So that's what we're going to see here this weekend. Now, you may be thinking, what about Ferrari? Surely Ferrari can play a factor in this. Have you not learned already, guys? We're round 24. I appreciate that you still have hope, but come on. We've seen 23 rounds now this season. Surely, I mean, fool you once, like, shame on me, but fool you 23 times, Jesus. I mean, I don't think I can, there's a saying for that. But Ferrari aren't going to get involved, and Mercedes I don't think are going to get involved, and I think those front 3 are going to pull out a free pit stop over the rest of the field pretty quickly. And if there's no safety cars, I think really that is Max Verstappen's hope here this weekend is, can he put out a blistering quali lap? Yes, there's always that possibility. I just don't think the Red Bull is going to have the same level of performance here as the McLarens over a full lap. But he has done it here before, Max. If he's not on pole position, then it's all about, of course, turn 1, where anything is possible. And then when it comes to safety car restarts, that's where he can take advantage as well, as he did, obviously, back in 2021. Not his fault. He was put in that position, by the way. Not his fault. Any driver would do the same if they were put in that position. It was those who were in race control that day. So those are kind of like the only scenarios. And Lando Norris, of course, if Max is able to lunge it down the inside and have an opportunity, Lando still has more to lose. Lando still only needs P3, and I think this could end up being quite a comfortable race for him. And they'll finish quite far ahead of those behind. So, yeah. But there are many permutations, of course. If Max wins, then Lando needs to finish P4, the exact same results back in Qatar. He would end up with more race wins than both McLaren drivers. He'd be on the same points as Lando, by the way, but he'd win on countback because he'd have 8 wins to Lando's 7. If he finishes P2, then it's a lot harder for him. He needs Lando to finish 4 places further down. You can see on the spreadsheet that I have on screen right now. So he needs to finish P8, and then if he finishes P3, then he needs Lando to finish P5. He cannot finish outside of the podium positions, otherwise he will not win the championship. He will not score enough points to do so, to make up that 12-point gap. If Oscar finishes P1, he needs Lando to finish P6, and if he finishes P2, he needs Lando to finish P10, and that's why it's so much more harder for Oscar, because he cannot finish outside of the top 2. So, yes, very, very many different permutations that we'll be keeping an eye on. I'm going to memorize this for the race on Sunday. So you can see there, even if Lando finishes P4, even if he finishes P11, if outside the top 10, then Max needs to finish P4 and he'll still win the title. So yeah, so many different permutations, and you may be thinking, well, can Lando not finish outside the top 3? Well, yes, he can with McLaren. Anything's possible with McLaren. As we have seen, they have handed this on a plate, really, to Max Verstappen and just said, why don't you join us for dinner? Why don't you join us for dinner in Abu Dhabi? Let's have fun together. I don't know why, to the bewilderment of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, because he should be mathematically out of this championship right now with just the fumbles that they've had the last 2 race weekends. But you know what? Regardless, whoever wins the championship this weekend, they deserve it. I know many online will say, oh, Lando doesn't deserve it this year. None of the McLaren drivers deserve it. Oscar doesn't because he's had a poor second half of the season. Only Max deserves it because he's been driving an underperforming car. Look, Max, I think, has been the best driver on the grid this year, but you know what? Lando and Oscar have found themselves in a position where they can fight for their first ever world title. And you know what? Max made many mistakes on his first attempt at a world title as well. And of course, the level of his performance and Lewis Hamilton's performance was worlds above the rest of the field. But Max has never found himself in a team where he has a teammate to fight against. He's never found himself in this position that Oscar and Lando have found themselves in, fighting against teammates. A very unique scenario that only happens rarely in F1, because normally the Max situation where he is the number 1 driver is the norm. Michael Schumacher was the case. Lewis Hamilton found himself with that inter-team battle, and we saw how fraught that relationship got and how challenging that was. And that's what both of these drivers have found this year, and they're not going for their second world title, third world title, they're going for their first world title. So the extra added amount of pressure that they've got fighting between themselves, and also the incompetency of McLaren themselves, has allowed Max to find himself where he is. But I think if Oscar or Lando win this championship, I think they thoroughly deserve it. I think Oscar, if he still wins this championship, he deserves it because of how he performed so consistently well for the majority of the season, and how he was able to pick himself back up in the last couple of races of the season when he was massively down in the dumps and he thought the world was against himself, his team was against him, but he was able to clutch victory at the end of the season and dig deep when it matters most. If Lando wins it, then he's been able to turn around a deficit when everyone thought the team should have prioritised his teammate. 32 points when he was down in the dumps after that mechanical failure. He's had a disqualification from no fault of his own from his teammate. He's had a strategy blunder by the team, which has allowed both his teammate and Max Verstappen back into this championship while he's been on tremendous form in the second half of this season. And it would be a great turnaround from him, considering how the first half of the season went. and he'd be a deserving world champion. And Max Verstappen, staying in this championship. If there is ever an indication in sport that sometimes all you need to do is just stay there and be a thorn in the side of your competitors, even if you have underperforming machinery, even if you aren't quite, and the whole package isn't quite at the same level of your opponent, as long as you're still there, you're still able to apply the pressure, especially on those who are going for their first world title, who are going for their first championship in whatever sport it may be, and you've been there and done it enough times, and you can use your experience to apply that pressure and to pick away those race wins when you know that your car is in that window of small operation to win those races. That this season is an example of that, and you capitalize on your opponents and competition's failures and weak moments. That is exactly the competitor that Max Verstappen has been this year, and this would probably go down as his best championship ever out of what would be the 5. So all of them are deserving world champions for many reasons, some that I've just mentioned. And you know what? May the best man win come Sunday. And I hope you guys can join me for it on Sunday. I'll be here, of course, for every session, barring FP1, which is the rookie session, because unfortunately I still have a day job that I have to attend and I have an important meeting in that Friday morning. But I'll be there for every single session throughout the weekend. And, of course, the all-important one, Sunday. I'm not going to miss that for the world, and I hope you guys will be able to join me for it. We'll see you then. Thanks, guys. Bye.